Now, as I mentioned before, Spider-Man 2 has a happy ending, so conceivably the series could have ended there. But instead it continues on in Spider-Man 3, which takes a very different direction from its predecessors. One of the themes of the Spider-Man trilogy is that each chapter features a villain with a sympathetic side. The villains tend to be as human as Peter Parker is. But Spider-Man 3 instead focuses on Peter Parker's unsympathetic side and how he begins to become corrupted by essentially the drug of being a hero and being, in effect, a celebrity. But more on that later. The point is that when Spider-Man 3 begins, Peter's life is essentially in order. The public of New York has accepted him as their hero, and he has finally gotten together with Mary Jane. They're a couple. But not all is well. There's some darkness brewing underneath this euphoric story. The main part of it is that there is now a rift between Peter and his best friend Harry Osborn. Now Harry's the son of the Green Goblin, who was killed back in the first Spider-Man film. And though Peter didn't kill the Goblin, the Goblin actually, in his attempt to kill Peter, accidentally killed himself. The whole world doesn't realize that's true. They think that Peter/Spider-Man killed the Goblin, so Harry, who now knows that Peter is Spider-Man, wants revenge, wants to become the new Goblin and take Spider-Man out. And so there's that element. And so we see this part of the narrative kick off fairly early. Most of the previous films started off kind of slow-paced and built up to some intense action. Whereas Spider-Man 3 starts off a bit more like a Star Wars film, with the action already in motion and events overlapping and whatnot. So no sooner are we a couple scenes into the film than Harry has swooped down from the sky and picked Peter up off his motorcycle and carried him high above New York for a really fantastic battle that reminds you what a good choreographer of action Sam Raimi can be as a director. And I just want to take a moment to linger on the action, because I haven't talked about that much yet. Because though the Spider-Man films are strong works because of their humanity and because they focus on Peter outside of his costume and his relationship problems and his money problems, they're also great films because of the action and the thrill of it and the way it's so coherent and easy to follow, even though it moves very quickly. So, for example, we get that amazing battle between Peter and Harry, which mostly takes place in the sky, but eventually descends into this alleyway where Peter is swinging between buildings and Harry is following him on this kind of electronic glider, and it's just breathtaking to see them dodging through this tight space, and Harry shouting out back there, "I'm still here, Peter," and waving a sword after him, and it's fantastic. Like you get the you never forget that there's gravity and that they could fall and die at any moment, and yet you get this sense of them being almost suspended above the ground in combat. So it's a fantastic moment. So thank you for letting me indulge myself and going off on a tangent about that, how epic that scene is. But the story, in a way, really begins after that happens, and after Peter begins to, as I mentioned before, become corrupted. So at the end of Spider-Man 2, it felt like he and Mary Jane were going to be able to have a good life together. But problems begin to arise almost immediately. Peter in Spider-Man 3 is really enjoying the publicity he's getting for being Spider-Man. He loves that kids look up to him, that people are throwing Spider-Man rallies, and that the Spidey propaganda machine is in full swing. But Mary Jane, on the other hand, is not having such a great time. As an actress, she's getting a lot of bad reviews and even gets fired from this huge musical that she loved being a part of. And she needs support, she needs reassurance. But Peter's selfish but understandable attitude is that I don't really want someone else's problems getting in the way of my fun and my enjoyment of finally having a great time and not being a tortured hero. So he tries to brush over all her problems and just say, like, you know, oh, get back on the horse, you know, just be positive, and that doesn't work for her. I mean, why would it work for anyone? It's terrible advice. I mean, he's not capable at this point of being a good romantic partner, of showing any kind of empathy, and that is what is beginning to kill their relationship early in the film. And Peter, who hasn't been in a serious relationship before, at least not that we know of. I mean, maybe in the gaps between films, who knows? But clearly he doesn't know what he's doing, so he's planning to propose to Mary Jane, not even realizing that his whole attitude is alienating her completely. And things only get worse from there. Peter's arrogance and his love of the publicity is bad enough when he's just, you know, going around acting cocky and saying, "People love me." But it gets even worse when he finds out something that really darkens the mood of the film. He learns that the man he thought killed his Uncle Ben in the first film actually didn't kill him. That it was actually a different convict named Flint Marko, who's played by Thomas Hayden Church in Spider-Man 3, who, just Peter's luck, happens to have acquired the power to shapeshift into sand. Funny how that happens. But so Peter, when he learns about this at the police station, suddenly the wrath starts to boil in him. The publicity he's getting, the positive feedback from the entire city of New York, has put him in a place where he's very content and very proud. And so that pride gets a negative inflection when he hears about the murderer of his uncle is still at large, and suddenly, instead of feeling able to forgive or able to acknowledge that, yes, I too have made mistakes, he wants revenge. He's out for blood. He wants to kill somebody. And so this puts him at the worst possible place he could possibly be. But here's the great thing, and I love Sam Raimi for doing this. So about halfway through the movie, Peter has alienated Mary Jane because at this point his anger, his desire for revenge has essentially pushed her out of his life, in addition to everything else. And so we get this scene where Peter's standing in his apartment, wondering what to do. Is he going to hunt down this man who killed his uncle? Is he going to kill him? And so he takes off his clothes, strips down to his Spider-Man costume, but he doesn't put on the mask. And he just stands there, wondering what to do. And then he lies down in bed, closes his eyes, and then he starts dreaming about the night he tracked down the man who he thought killed Uncle Ben in the first film, who we now know is innocent. And what happened in that scene in the first film when he tracked him down is Peter is the guy pulled a gun on Peter, and then Peter, using his spider powers, thwacked it out of his hand, and in terror the criminal walks backward and stumbles through a window and falls, and the fall kills him. And so Peter didn't kill him. The guy died essentially accidentally. But the thing is that Spider-Man 3 takes a more complex look at this conundrum. So we get Peter's anger of the wrong guy died, and it was he's angry about that. He's angry that sort of the right man wasn't punished for killing his uncle. But then we get this dream sequence, this flashback, Peter dwelling on this night when we see the guy who fell out the window. We see him fall, and then you hear a replay of what he says to Peter in the first film. Just give me a chance. And at that moment you realize it's not just the fact that the wrong guy died that's eating up Peter. It's the fact that even though the death was an accident, he does blame himself for it, and he does feel like he killed this guy, and that in that moment the film seizes upon his vulnerability and gets right to the heart of it, and it's just I love it how it cuts through all of Peter's arrogance and his pride and digs at that moment. But the sad thing is that by this point, Peter has gone too far down the proverbial rabbit hole. The idea of revenge is seized upon him, and it only gets worse when he stumbles upon this strange substance that this alien sort of goo that attaches itself to his costume, and just at the absolute wrong moment, again, increases his powers and gives him all this strength. It also works like a drug, sort of lowering his inhibitions and making him more susceptible to his desires for revenge. So in a sense, this is the point at which Peter becomes an addict, relying on this substance that's bonded with him, this parasite essentially, and craving it. Although it's crucial to note that that people can't see that it's latched onto him, because like he can wear his clothes over his costume and sort of mask this parasite that's bonded to him, so he can go out and walk around on the streets and people will just think he's a normal person. But he's not, and I love how the movie deals with this idea of addiction through a comic book lens. Now, this idea of a superhero addicted to some kind of fantastical substance that's sort of a metaphor for drugs. It's not new exactly, and in fact, just a few years before Spider-Man 3 was in theaters, I think 4 years, I believe, Smallville, the TV show about young Superman, also did something similar with Superman being addicted to this this also alien substance. But what's interesting about Smallville is it portrayed addiction as sort of this, like rage-fueled, anguished thing, this brutal process, which was interesting, very interesting. But Spider-Man 3 takes a different approach. It portrays it in the beginning as sort of a fun ride. So Peter, he's no longer this shy guy. He goes out and kills the man who kills his uncle, or he thinks he killed him. Spoiler alert, this evil Flint Marko rises from the dead later on. But anyway, Peter is enjoying, he gets to be the cool guy. He struts down the street, he dances, he buys a new suit, and he's having a grand old time. And it all comes to a head in this this brilliant scene where he's broken up with Mary Jane. And Mary Jane now works as a waitress at a jazz club. And Peter takes one of his classmates, Gwen Stacy, on a date there. And he I want to do this scene justice, so bear with me. Mary Jane gets up to sing, but then Peter suddenly appears on stage and starts dancing, and turns the whole focus of the room towards him, and so we get this marvelous scene where he's swinging from the chandeliers and sliding about the room and playing the piano and just like playing at being a jazz dancer, and it's insane. It's a hilarious comic set piece, and it's really one of the highlights of the series. And it's fun. It's witty. The silliness is very knowing, and Mr. Raimi and Tobey Maguire as Peter, they're both very attentive to that. But here's the good part. Peter ultimately dances with Gwen, and then during the final chords of the song, as they finish their dance, he leans over and looks Mary Jane in the eye, just glaring, just essentially punishing her for not making their relationship work, even though it was Peter's fault. But he's a crazy addict by now, so he's not thinking clearly. And then Gwen turns to him and says, she realizes that Peter essentially used her to get to Mary Jane, and so she storms out, and so suddenly Peter's left alone, and he's no longer the star of the show. Suddenly he's just an asshole, a complete idiot who's made a fool of himself. And so he goes over to MJ and starts cutting her down with some nastiness, and then soon the security guards, the bouncers at the club, are on him. And there's this just fantastically chilling moment where one of them grabs him and says, "Let's go." And Peter says, "Take your hands off me." And from there, a fight breaks out. Now, I want you to appreciate this. The great thing about this moment, about this fight, and again, I'm afraid I'm going to have to deliver some minor spoilers because it's the only way to talk about this scene. But I mean, usually we see Peter fighting criminals and fighting supervillains, but here in this scene, he's fighting normal people. They don't know he's a superhero. They don't realize that they have no chance against this guy who's strong enough probably to like lift a car over his head or whatever. It's a horribly one-sided fight in the middle of a club, and we get slowly the fun ride of his addiction is coming to an end. It's darkened, and then it gets to its absolute darkest point when Mary Jane calls out, "Peter, stop!" And just in a mad whirl, he turns around and hits her across the face. And at that moment, he realizes what he's done. He sees his addiction for what it is. And at that moment, everything just seems to stop. The whole madness is over, and it's there for all the world to see that he has become a monster. And it's quite a powerful thing. And as horrible as it is, it's fascinating to watch, to see this superhero at his absolute worst. And the fact that it sneaks up on you so abruptly that you've been enjoying the comedy of Peter's craziness and his addiction and his rad dance moves, and then suddenly it all comes crashing to an end, and that sticks. That's an unforgettable moment, and that's what Spider-Man 3 contributes, the darkness within Peter. And I think it hits upon something that's really important and really primal. I, like Peter, I've always considered myself a nerd, a geek, and not in all cases been some an outsider. And I think within every geek, anyone who feels like they don't fit in, there is a desire to strike out, to unleash this, to get angry. And I've always stopped myself from doing that, because I strongly abhor starting any kind of conflict. I think it's completely wrong. And the film plays into that really well by illuminating just the horror of what Peter's done. And it's really, really powerful. So the question is redemption possible after this? How does a fallen superhero come back when they've become the villain? And the answer is, you can't really. It's really not possible. And the thing is that after what Peter's done, there can be no happy ending. There can be no complete and total redemption for all the pain he's inflicted on the people who care about him. And so Spider-Man 3 has to end not so much with redemption, but with penance. And so, again, I know I'm doing this a lot, but I'm going to have to talk about spoilers, because there's no other way. I have give me a break. I love this movie. I have to wax poetic about it a bit. So oh gosh. So Peter ultimately does get free of the drug-like substance that's corrupted him, and soon after that, the city is endangered by a cadre of villains. And so this can't make everything right, but it is his chance to be Spider-Man, to be the hero again. So we get this wonderful moment where he's just seen that the city is under attack on TV, and so he knows it's time, and he kneels down and pulls his Spider-Man costume out from under his bed. And you get Danny Elfman's theme all over again. Even though Christopher Young composed that score for Spider-Man 3, they bring back the great Danny Elfman music, and so you get the wonderful theme of bum ba bum ba bum ba 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 ba. And so as Peter's taking out his Spider-Man costume and looking at it, there's this wonderful continuity that goes back to the first film, because there was a similar moment after Uncle Ben died in the first film, when he took the costume out from under his bed, and you know as he's looking at it, that's the moment that he's deciding to take up a higher calling, to become a hero, to fight crime. And so this moment in Spider-Man 3, where he's taking the costume out again, is a callback to that, a reminder, and thus he's coming full circle, but at the same time in a way that's sadder and wiser. And in the end, the sadness lingers, because there's more tragedy to come during the climax of Spider-Man 3. There's more destruction, there's more death, but there's also more forgiveness and more hope as well. And there's a kind of sweet tragedy that occurs towards the end of the film. So one of the, again, spoiler alert, one of the major parts of the story is that though Harry ultimately initially tries to kill Peter, he ultimately realizes that Peter's not at fault and chooses to help him save the city. But in doing so, he sacrifices his life. And so there's this wonderful moment where Harry is lying on one of the top floors of this skyscraper that's under construction while the sun is rising, and Peter and Mary Jane are with him. And earlier in the film, Peter injured Harry very badly, and now feels guilty about it. So there's this beautiful sequence in which, Peter says to him, "I should never have hurt you. I should never have said those things." And Harry says, "None of that matters now because you're my friend." And rarely are movies that sad and that beautiful at the same time. And it's so precious, that kind of sincerity, that kind of love on film captured so powerfully and so forcefully. And so even Spider-Man, even though Spider-Man 3 is a tragic end to the trilogy, even though it ends on a downbeat note, you can't help but feel happy because of the sweetness of that sadness and the way it touches and overwhelms you. Well, that completes my diagnostic of the Spider-Man trilogy, directed by the wonderful Sam Raimi. I think before I should go, I should just do a quick shout out to some of the other magnificent people involved with the film. Producer Laura Ziskin, who died a couple years ago, who oversaw the project. Alvin Sargent, who guided the story as a screenwriter. And definitely the cinematographers who worked on the movie, Don Burgess and Bill Pope, who helped it gain its beautiful and bright but also poetic comic book palette. And of course the editors, Arthur Coburn and Bob Murawski, who shaped it all, who made it the coherent and emotionally engaging saga that it was. Now, it pains me to tell you that I am going to have to put this series on hiatus for a little bit, because next week I will be teaming up with Mo Shawnette and Maxwell Myers. We'll be doing a little preview of the Batman vs. Superman movie, talking about everything that's going on with that, from Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor to the new release date. And then the week after that, just let me check the day. What will it be? So let's see. This is the 7th. Okay. So I will be back here. I will be back here. You should come back here on the 21st, because I will be talking about J.J. Abrams' Star Trek. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, so just a little preview. That's the Star Trek theme, by the way. You probably knew that. But thank you very much. Good to talk to you as always, and I will see you soon.